Welcome to the Web Platform Podcast, a developer discussion that dives deep into all things web. We discuss topics relevant to developing for the modern web and the web platform of today, tomorrow, and beyond.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Web Platform Podcast. Episode number 174. Today we're talking about the Brave browser. We are your hosts this week, Justin, Leon, Eric, and Denny. Gentlemen, hello. How's it going?
Hey.
Hello.
Hello, Justin.
The excitement in the room is palpable.
Well, it is finally turned to fall on the East Coast, so it is gray and cold, and it's Tuesday.
It's also the fall on the West Coast, if it makes you feel any better. It's 85 degrees outside and sunny,
Yeah.
so we're feeling fall fantastically.
I know.
Thanks, Justin. Thank you.
Yeah, California's rough. It's rough weather out here. But we're not talking about the weather today. We're talking about Brave. And before we introduce our guest this week, let's throw it over to Leon, who's going to talk about This Week in the Web in 2 minutes or less. Leon.
Thanks, Justin. So some exciting news to start off with. Custom Elements and Shadow DOM are now finally in development for Microsoft Edge.
Yes!
So that's something, that's very exciting. Finally, full work components across all of the Evergreen browsers, which is really, really cool. And work has started on dynamic module imports in Firefox. Version 7 of the JavaScript V8 engine is now in beta, and that includes a preview of WebAssembly threads. The array sort method has been updated to use the stable timsort algorithm, and a description property has been added to the symbol prototype. So that's all in the version 7 of the JavaScript V8 engine, which is now in beta. Ember 3.5 has just been released, and this includes loads of improvements, like up to 32% speed increase in build times and loads of other stuff, so go and check that out. Create React app, which allows you to get started with a React project without any configuration, has just had an update. So version 2.05 includes loads of bug fixes and improvements, so take a look at that if you want to find out more. And finally, Style Components version 4 is out, and this includes loads of new features, better performance, and much more. So if you want to find out anything more about the Style Components, go and check out the announcement post. And that's everything from me for This Week in Web. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you, Leon. Oh, so many exciting things happening on the platform, and Chrome Dev Summit's just around the corner, so I'm sure we'll hear even more wonderful things.
Yeah, very exciting.
And speaking of browser things and whatnot, let's introduce our guest this week, Jonathan Sampson. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you guys for having me.
So, Jonathan, for those out there who don't know you, tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Jonathan Sampson. I typically just go by Sampson. It's a little bit easier. Started web development about 95, 96, back in the Navigator days. And let's see, prior to Brave, where I am right now, I was actually on the Edge team. So it's nice to see Edge in the news and stuff, and Edge kind of progressing with the web platform there. But yeah, that's pretty much me. I live in Florida with my wife and kids, and travel quite a bit.
So you've been on the platform a long time. You've seen the ups and downs, the travails and whatnot, and now you're working on Brave. So I know a lot of people have probably heard of Brave in the development community, but for those who don't, sort of Brave in 30 seconds, sort of what is Brave's sort of MO?
Oh my goodness. Well, Brave, the story of it spans 2 decades, but in 30 seconds, Brave is a web browser that puts user privacy and security first and foremost, principle above all else, and is trying to, in addition to that, reform the online digital advertising industry as well.
That is a succinct soundbite. It's almost as if you've been asked this question before.
I would love to work on the answer to make it a little bit better. You know, years ago, whenever I started working at Microsoft, one of the things they warned us was that at any moment of any day, we could find ourselves in an elevator with Satya Nadella or something like that. And we need to have a 10-second soundbite to justify our existence and our job. And it was like, oh, dear God, like that is frightful right there. So you kind of have to work on, coming up with a quick explanation for what it is you do and what your goals are.
I was once told at Microsoft that if you crossed Steve Ballmer at the time, you were immediately fired. That was just if you walked by him at certain points in the day, that was
Oh man,
the shtick.
I don't know. I do know that I've heard people run into him at conferences and stuff. He seems like a nice guy, but who knows? We all have our bad days, I guess.
It was a different. I will admit that was a different Microsoft. It's very strange to talk about. I know we've talked about it a little bit on the show before, but the '90s Microsoft that I remember is not the Microsoft anymore. It's rather crazy. But Brave itself, it itself has gone through its sort of a transformation of a thing, right? Because we've got a lot of browsers out there. Obviously, we've got a lot of engines these days. Less so now that Opera is, sadly, we don't have Presto anymore. But Brave itself, why come about with another browser now? Why try to tackle the advertising industry and sort of like, what is the development story around that? I mean, that's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, we go back. I kind of mentioned there briefly that the story kind of spans multiple decades, and so if you go back to the early '90s, we remember that Mosaic was pretty much one of the leading browsers, and then you had things like Lynx pop up from Lou Montulli. Navigator started up, of course, when Andreessen and them went over and founded Netscape. So in the early days, the web was just pretty much static, just text, stateless, not a whole lot of fun. It was a lot of fun at the time, but in retrospect, it wasn't all that. Wasn't nothing to hoot at, I guess. But around '93, I believe it was, or '92, the image element was created, and hot linking became a thing where you could then link to different resources from other servers. '94, if I'm not mistaken, was when Vince Cerf had asked Lou Montulli to come up with some type of client-side data storage mechanism, and that's when the cookie was created. And just that addition of those two items together, the hot linking of third-party resources and then cookies, which are sent out and with each server response and request, that gave us online tracking. That gave third parties the ability to monitor your activity as you moved across the web, provided they could get some type of resource onto the websites you were visiting. And so along came JavaScript in '95, and that just kind of poured gasoline on it, as it made it a catalyst, because now instead of just simple requests, sending cookies, now these requests would lead to scripts, which could then survey their local environment. They could modify the window. They could do all sorts of fingerprinting, that type of stuff. And so over the last 20 years, this entire industry has just gotten really crazy. It's gotten unbelievably wild. And today we're starting to see a blowback with things like GDPR, where people are starting to have a little more concern for their security online. They're aware of just how much data is being leaked out into this sea of third parties. And so Brave kind of stepped in 2015. I think Brendan has had the idea for quite some time, but Brave kind of stepped in 2015 to say, like, we need to put a stop to this. Like, something radical has to take place, because right now this is just going unchecked largely. I mean, we did see the rise of ad blockers, more than 600 million devices, and that number is trending up and to the right. And so people were kind of getting upset with this for quite some time. But whenever we launched Brave, in order to get something up and running quickly, we actually launched on the Electron project, which was a GitHub experiment, basically, where they had taken the V8 engine, they had taken Blink from the Chromium project, and they had packaged it in such a way that you could make native desktop applications using web-based technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We kind of saw this before too. I think Windows 8 had Microsoft Store applications. I forget what the name was. They changed it a few times, but it was the ability to create these desktop applications using web-based technologies. And that was great. We got a browser set up. We started using React to build the UI and stuff. It was working fantastically. And then Yan Zhu, our chief information security officer, she started talking to some people who were finding some unsavory bugs in the browser, because as great as Electron was, it wasn't built to be a web browser. And so we now had this amazing application which was sucking in third-party code and executing it on the user's machine, giving it access to things like Node APIs, which have file system access, scary stuff. And so Jan worked diligently to harden as much of that as she could, and we released Muon, which was this fork of the Electron project, a hardened, security, focused, browser-ready package. And so we've seen some other people use Muon, and for the large part, it was great. But updating Muon with updated Chromium packages and patches becomes a little more difficult, because now you're downstream, by multiple generations. We have the Chromium package, which is downstream from Electron, which is downstream from Muon. And so it becomes a little more arduous and laborious to keep up to date. And so that's why we decided, we need to make a change and jump over to the Chromium project and apply our patches directly, which would get us on a 3-week cadence release cycle. And so all that to be said, we've got a really exciting history. The project has been an absolute joy to work on, and we've got a bright future ahead of us, I think.
That all sounds fantastic. That's actually a really, really amazing
processing.
Answer. Yeah. No, that's really cool. It's refreshing to hear a main focus fundamentally being the end user, not just we get to build a bunch of cool things, but fundamentally being what is best, what at least what we think is best for users. Not just the speed of stuff, but the actual. Again, when you mentioned GDPR, and a lot of people, I know even my parents are more concerned about what can get on my computer without me even really knowing about it. So you mentioned so under the hood. So I think you said it there a second ago. So Brave is now using Chromium, correct?
That's correct. It was always based on Chromium, but we were kind of downstream a bit of the ways. And so what we've done is we've moved closer to the Chromium base itself. And so prior to the Brave Core release, which is what we're calling the Chromium based project, we would have to receive patches and updates via that supply stream, basically through Electron, through Muon. And so that was just fairly laborious, difficult to keep up that way.
Okay. So would you say that now is it easier for you all now to keep up with the rapid pace of changes within Chromium?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we did a pretty spectacular job. I want to give credit to the team when we were running purely on Muon. I mean, for the most part, I'd say with every major release, we would have our entire user base updated before Chrome would have theirs. And so, but that was unbelievably difficult to continue to do that and keep up the momentum. And so now that we're based more directly on the Chromium project, we can apply our patches and we can do in hours what would take days or weeks before.
That's awesome. That's great.
Would you say that that Brave is faster than other browsers, or would you say it's on par with Chromium or a little bit slower than Chromium? How does it compare to others?
Yeah, so on the front of Brave.com, we boast that it is up to 8 times faster, and so this is definitely something we are confident about and we stand behind. And so the reason why it's faster, though, a lot of people ask, well, if it's based on Chromium, it's the same code base. Why would it be any faster? But the foundational bits are not what makes it faster. Granted, we do some stuff in there. For instance, the Chromium code base attempts to make connections to Google servers and that type of stuff. We don't do that. So there is a minimal amount of latency that we cut out because we're not making any calls out to any other servers. But the primary way in which we achieve, faster gains is by cutting out ads and trackers, these third-party ads and trackers, which, according to New York Times, several studies in 2015, even I think Opera may have had something in recent history, or Vivaldi, I can't remember who, where they determined that more than half of the data we load on the web is third-party ads and trackers. And so and the New York Times study even actually put a price tag on it. We were spending upwards of $23 a month in data charges to load ads and trackers. And so
more than half. That is bonkers.
Yeah, it's more than half is going to ads and trackers. And this issue is it's gotten more and more extreme over the years. And so what happens is when you reduce the size of the server response by more than half, you drastically speed up the page process, like the page speed. Now that does come with the caveat that you're cutting revenue, some degree of revenue for those content creators. And so, Brave, unlike some others in the industry, we weren't content with just blocking. Granted, that gives us a much faster browsing experience for our users, but we don't like the idea of cutting revenue away from content creators. So, we introduced the Brave payment system in the past, which I think we might get into here in just a little bit.
Yeah, it was one of the reasons I was an early adopter of Brave. I think in like 2015 or 16. I've been using it for a long time. The one of the things I really liked was that payment integration and the fact that there was so much control in the settings for ads.
Right. Yeah, so each site, so inside Brave, we have these kind of global settings, which lets you say, you know what, I want to allow ads, or I don't want to allow ads. I want to allow cookies, or I want to allow only first-party cookies, block third-party cookies. We have controls for things like fingerprinting, which, web developing, community here that's listening. Some quick examples of fingerprinting, because it's a term that some people aren't always familiar with. When you create links by default on a web page, they're either purple or blue. More often than not, they're blue, but whenever you visit them, you come back to the page, they're purple. This has been used in the past by scripts that would just dump, 10, 20,000 links into the DOM, and they would read the color of the link back, and they would infer whether or not you've been to that page. So if I wanted to send you to a Bank of America exploit, page, I could first create a Bank of America link in the DOM in your client. And if the link is purple, then I know that you bank there. And so I can now send you off to that, or I can send you to a Regions Bank, vulnerability or something like that, or phishing page. And so this is one way in which your history can be inferred. Fingerprinting can also be, achieved by just querying some of the environment, variables, looking at the fonts that you have installed, your screen size, your device pixel ratio, and taking all of this together and using that as some type of means of monitoring your traffic around the web when you can't be directly identified, but you can be identified by, this meta information about your device. And so Brave has controls to block fingerprinting as well. And all of these are accessible via a small lion icon up at the top right hand of the browser, which that's probably one of my favorite features, that and the new tab page, which shows quantitatively how much time has been added to your life because you didn't spend that time loading ads and trackers.
So I'm sure we want to get into some more stuff around security as well. So one thing I'm curious about is very specifically the ad tracking, and I'm curious if Brave is, since it is baked into, since it's a core part of the platform of the browser itself. I'm wondering, is Brave better at it than, for example, if it was just a plugin that you would install on Chrome or Firefox? Is Brave better, and is it better because it's a core part of the platform?
Yeah, great question. I mean, this is a lot of people ask, like, why a browser? Why not just make a Chrome extension? Basically every other ad blocker out there, it's a Chrome extension. But we opted to the browser because we're not going to be limited by the APIs that are exposed to the extension space itself. Not to mention, we don't have to ask permission, to do certain things as an extension would. And so we are able to, definitely do lookups of lists and that type of stuff in C++, which is going to be a lot quicker than doing it in JavaScript on top of, way at the top of the tech stack. And so that does afford us some performance opportunities. But just, by virtue of being in the browser, we can do things that others couldn't do as easily. So for instance, we started blocking autoplay media back before it was cool. Basically, we went in and modified the actual core structure of the media elements and exposed a prompt to the user to say, do you want to allow, the autoplay attribute to have some, behavior on this page effectively. And so that was something that we could do because we had the browser itself. We had control of the browser substrate. And so we'll continue to benefit from that in the future moving forward as well.
We went a little into this, but what are Brave's main features? One of its main features is security. Can you tell us about, what makes Brave different than other browsers as far as security goes?
Yeah. So, pro users, tech users, super users, whatever you want to call them, they're usually able to set up a browser, whether it's Edge or Firefox or Chrome or Vivaldi or something, and configure it in such a way that they're very safe. They know which extensions to go out and install. Apologize, there's a truck moving by here. So they're usually able to set it up in such a way that they are very safe, and they can do this for families and friends and stuff like that. But this is kind of a liberty and a luxury that's only really been afforded to the technically savvy people. And so Brave is built in such a way that we deliver that degree of security and privacy out of the box. It's not something that you have to meticulously opt into by going out and installing the right extensions, by configuring the browser in such a way that it has your privacy and security as its utmost priority. And so with Brave, by default, we block third-party ads and trackers. Third-party ads and trackers are the primary means by which real-time bidding takes place, where for every ad slot on every page you visit, your personal information is shared with a sea of third-party data warehouses. There is an auction for you and your attention that takes place for every ad slot. And when the winning bidder is decided, that is when their ad is shown. And so that entire process kind of freaks us out. It's like that is, for one, that's considered a data breach according to GDPR. And so we don't think users would be happy with that if they understood the process more fully. And so we block third-party ads and trackers. We also block phishing and malware URLs, which is something that has been unbelievably prevalent on the web these days. Especially you drop into a page that claims their Microsoft support, and you have to call some number to unlock your computer or something like that. And so Brave does all this right out of the box. We don't think this is something that you should have to opt into, and we feel that gives the average user a more secure and more reliable experience without the cost of having to grind away on configurations to achieve that.
Wow, that was way detailed. That's pretty good, though. I mean, I've never had any problems with Brave since I've been using it with security, and I thought it was definitely a big strong point. Also, the privacy because of the ads. So with that privacy, like we talked about, the ad blocking for sure, online payments a little bit. So one of the questions that I'm constantly asking myself, even with Chrome, is, how does Chrome, or how does specifically for this Brave, make money, when you're not allowing those ads, when you're not doing certain things? Like, what is the business model for this type of project?
Yeah, that's a good question, and this is something that we had to face early on, because if you're going to engage in ad and tracker blocking, which is necessary because it protects the end user from things like drive-by crypto jacking scripts, which spike up your CPU usage to generate Monero tokens. If you're going to block this stuff from reaching the users, you have to have some type of story for the publishers who are publishing all this content, and now they're not able to monetize it as well. And so one of the things we did early on is we integrated support for Bitcoin and the blockchain. And so I believe you mentioned that you had been using Brave since about 2015. So you probably saw the early Bitcoin integration. And this allowed users to purchase these cryptographic tokens effectively, and then transfer them to the website owners in lieu of viewing ads and trackers and that type of stuff. Of course, Bitcoin had kind of a rough run there in 2015, 2016. If you wanted to buy $5 in Bitcoin, you would have to pay $3 in fees. It just got really difficult. And so one of the things we wound up doing was in 2016, I believe, we held a token sale. We kind of generated an ERC20 standard token based on the Ethereum blockchain. It's called the basic attention token because it's a unit of value to basically reflect the commodity or the value in our attention itself, which has been stolen from us for so long. And so we had a successful token sale. I think we raised $35 million in 20 seconds. And that was all in Ethereum. And so it's a good day. And so the great thing about this was not money just to line the pockets of corporate fat cats or something like this. One of the things that we had published early on is that we wanted to have a user growth pool. So we wanted to spin up this reformed version of this digital advertising online, and we wanted to give people a bunch of free money, effectively, a bunch of credits that kind of primes the system and gets them involved. And so we allocated, I think it was 300 million BAT. BAT is just the basic attention token. And we decided what we're going to do is we're going to give away a bunch of this every month. I think it's roughly 500,000 every month. And that is in addition to various contests and stuff. Like, for instance, right now, we just wrapped up a contest, celebrating 4.5 million monthly active users, where people could create a video submission, and we're going to give out 100,000 BAT to the winners. And then that itself is in parallel to another effort where people can go to brave.com/refer, and they can create a referral link, and that referral link will earn them $5 for every user that comes to the Brave community via their link. And so we decided, we need to be pumping some money back into the system, back into the pockets of these content creators. We need to make the web profitable. We need to remonetize the web. And this isn't just remonetizing people who are affected by ad blocking. This was monetizing people who had never gotten monetized before. There were a lot of YouTube creators who didn't pass the approval on YouTube to monetize their content. But YouTube's requirements for what is monetizable is irrelevant to us. Users get to monetize whatever videos they watch, whether it's a big channel that has hundreds of thousands of viewers or a small channel that only has 10 or 15 subscribers. You can monetize any content now. And so people can reward you for basically their attention. And so we've had this UGP, this user growth pool, sitting there. It's been, basically funding and priming the system. But what we're doing in addition to this, because the UGP is a finite amount of BAT, it's not going to be there forever. We actually stood up Brave Ads. And this is part of the bigger picture of identifying that ads work on the web. Ads are the primary means by which web content is monetized. So we realized that ads work on the web, and ads are the primary means by which content is monetized on the web, but there was something inherently bad about ads, and that was that third-party tracking nature. And this was, again, just an accidental evolution of the web technology kind of landscape, but it's co-opted by people and it's been used for bad stuff. And so we realized that we could actually move a lot of this now that we're here in 2018, machines are faster, phones are smarter. We could move a lot of this into the client, onto the device itself with local machine learning. We could offer people in a completely opt-in experience. They could opt into locally matched ads, and they could get paid for their attention. And so for users who are viewing ads, that surface on their desktop as a native notification, they would get 70% of the revenue for that ad. And in the future, whenever publishers opt into the system as well, and an ad is displayed on their page, but it's done client side in a non-leaky manner, a private manner, they would get 70% of the ad revenue, and all of the extra non-ad slot revenue would be distributed to the other parties. So in the case of a user who's not viewing an ad on the web page, they're viewing an ad in a private tab, they would get 70%, Brave would get 30%. In the model of a publisher ad, which is an ad shown on a website, the owner of that website gets 70%, the user gets 15%, and Brave gets 15%. And so Brave is going to be able to monetize this apparatus moving forward, but we're also able to pay content creators more than they've ever gotten in the past, and for the first time, pay users for their attention, because they've been getting robbed in this entire process.
So I think that's really interesting. Kind of like what the root of the overall question is, obviously you guys aren't doing this stuff for free, or you folks aren't doing this stuff for free. So the Brave, the company itself, has to make money. What I'm curious about is I'm curious what the decision was like when you decided that you felt that you were going to offer ads, considering that one of the first things that Brave talks about is blocking ads but then you're like, but here are our ads. I'm just curious. And you went through you gave a very good description of how they work and how they're different than what we currently think of as web-based ads. Now, I'm just curious what the reaction was to that, because as a headline or as something on Twitter, right? It's just like, these are Brave ads, and then everybody's like, oh, well, now they're just trying to funnel everything through their ad system instead of another one. I'm curious what the PR had to be like for that. I'm curious how carefully you had to roll it out, how the communications had to go.
It's lots of fun, I can assure you. So whenever you tell someone that we're blocking ads, and of course we say we're blocking ads because that's a concise, sufficient explanation for what's going on. But users need to understand that ads are more than just ads. These are not like newspaper ads where it's just an opportunity for the mom and pop store, the brick and mortar location down the street to advertise their service to you. Advertising ads on the web today are their software, their applications, their small programs which run on your machine. They have access to more than just spraying pixels onto the screen. And so whenever we say we're blocking ads, what we're actually doing is blocking harmful applications which have a bit too much access into you, your privacy, your personal history, as we talked about, with the ability to create links and look at the color of those links. And then whenever we say that we're going to offer ads as an opt-in component, we also have to qualify that with saying, well, what type of ad? Well, these ads are inherently different. They're genetically different entirely. They're local, which means they're on your device. They're not being, your information is not going out into this sea of third parties and then letting everyone auction, your attention or bid on your attention. This is all happening now locally on your machine where your data has always been. My browser has always known my history. My browser has always known my bookmarks. And effectively, I'm usually safe unless I intentionally give that out to somebody. And so we're able to move this locally now, thanks to the advancements of blockchain, machine learning, processor speeds. And so usually you have to qualify what that means. We're blocking ads and we're offering ads, because those two things, although phonetically identical, are dramatically different.
I think that's absolutely fascinating. I've got a few follow-up questions. So the kind of model around how basically Brave gives back to the users for their attention, that kind of makes a lot of sense. And you also mentioned that basically users of Brave have got like some cryptocurrency kind of in their browser or whatever that they can then give back to content producers instead of viewing their traditional ads. Could you just talk a little bit about exactly kind of how that works? Like, how does a user or how does a content creator kind of make it possible for a user, a viewer, to give some some money or cryptocurrency or whatever?
Yeah, great question.
Podcast, so they might want to know.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
So I was watching an interview with Elon Musk, and he was talking about the early days of PayPal and some of the issues that they faced when growing. And he said, it's really interesting whenever you email someone and tell them that they have money waiting, they usually come to get it. And that's one of the things that we actually have with the basic attention token and the publisher system right now. Website owners do not have to precede the user's viewing in order to qualify for BAT effectively. And so what happens is, as the user browses the web, we offer them BAT grants. And so they'll see a notification in the browser, they can click it, and they'll have 25 basic attention token inside their wallet in the browser. And the whole experience is meant to be very intuitive and very familiar to the user. If they've ever done anything like purchase something off of eBay or fill out a form or something like that on the web, then they should know how to use and interact with the system, because we effectively efface and obscure the blockchain technology that's integrated. We don't think that users need to be worried with those types of details. And so
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And so we will offer them free grants every month, and they're then able to just browse the web normally. And the default behavior of the browser is it will look at your attention distribution across various properties. So if I spend 10% of my time on Wikipedia, then it will allocate 10% of my monthly BAT to Wikipedia. And then every month, there's basically the settlement phase where once a month it'll actually send out basically those contributions and allocate them for those domains. And if the domains are already verified, well, then those domain content creators, the owners, will get that bat. If they're not, then the bat kind of sits in escrow for a while. And I think it's once we get to $10 US worth or so, that's when we outreach to the content creators themselves and say, hey, there's some free money here, some attention token. Would you like to get this? You can exchange it for fiat if you want to, or you can leave it in bat form and use it in the system if you want to. And so I think so far it's been working really quite well. We've seen just superb growth and acceptance, and so it seems like it's working quite well.
If I'm a content creator, though, do I have to worry about people? I guess with any type of ads, you'd have to worry about this, but I'm wondering if there's the same susceptibility with Brave ads, where if you have something like a pie hole or something, some sort of hardware that filters all this out, is that something that content creators should be concerned with?
I don't think so. So are you asking if a pie hole could prevent Brave ads from showing as well?
Yeah. Like, does it do it automatically, or would you have to actually add that to the list?
Well, I think what happens with pie holes are they're typically able to, look at the traffic and then cut off certain requests and responses based upon the origin. With Brave ads, there's going to be a single catalog that is sent down once a day or so, something like that. If you blocked that request, then you would probably cause more problems in the Brave browser than just killing off ads or something. We'd have to look exactly, what URL that's going to be served from. But users could technically opt into Brave ads and set up a pie hole to prevent Brave ads from showing. But then they've effectively, broken the entire system, and they're not going to get paid for anything, and the content creators aren't going to get paid for anything. So that would be the user, cutting off their own feet effectively.
Don't cross the streams. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's, I would definitely say I don't think there's going to be an issue. We have our team is very much focused on this industry and making sure it works quite well. And if we ever notice any type of issue with people who run Pi-hole because they want maybe ad and tracker blocking beyond the browser itself, I'm definitely confident we would pivot as needed to accommodate those environments.
And there's standards like for coding too, like kind of like AMP does, right? I'm assuming, where you'd have certain performance standards and things. Because right now it's the Wild West, right? People can just inject whatever.
Yeah, with Brave, we actually don't require the content creators to do anything with their websites beyond demonstrate ownership over the domains. And so they don't have to. It's not like AMP. You could go in there and actually had some custom elements and custom controls. And then in some cases, your website would basically be cached on a Google server and that type of stuff. We're not going to be doing anything like that. Your website remains in your control. It remains however you built it. We don't have any requirements for, speed and performance, although we are kind of giving you performance gains by cutting out third-party ads and trackers. And so the content creators, all they need to do is, I think it's, publishers.basicattentiontoken.org or brave.com/creators. All they have to do is actually share a token either in their DNS, a publisher verification key, or they can put it as a flat file in a .well-known directory on their website, which is similar, to the experience for Let's Encrypt, if anyone's been used that in the past as well.
So we've talked a lot about some of the main features of Brave and kind of how it puts the user kind of as the main focus of the whole experience. But what about developers? Is there anything that Brave offers to developers, and is there anything that developers should consider when building an experience designed to work well with Brave?
Yeah, that's a great question. Being one of the things I love about our team is our team is almost entirely, even the people that work in like customer support are almost entirely developers or have some type of development background. And so with Brave, one of the great things, I say the number one request that we used to get with the Muon build was that people wanted to dock their developer tools to the tab And that was not something that Electron supported. It wasn't something, therefore, that Muon supported. But with the Brave core, the new Chromium-based releases, that's obviously supported right out of the box. So the high-level answer is that if a developer has ever done any web development or performance auditing and that type of stuff inside a Chromium-based browser, well, then everything should be entirely familiar to them inside the new Brave beta and Brave developer builds. And then I'd say one of the things to look out for is, because we block third-party ads and trackers, there are times at which you have false positives where some type of benign application, maybe it's something on a CDN, it kind of trips one of those heuristics and it looks like it could be a little sketchy, and so it gets blocked. And so we definitely, in those cases, we would prefer to make accommodations in the browser that make the website work without burdening the website developers to have to go and adjust the way they've coded things. But that would be the other thing that you might, definitely encounter in the future. Hopefully, it isn't something that you'll run into, but it's always a possibility.
Cool. That sounds really good. Something else I noticed on the Brave site is that you have some interesting partnerships, such as I think as partnership with DuckDuckGo, I believe. Could you talk a little bit about those partnerships and kind of what they bring to the story?
Yeah. So when Brendan announced that he was doing a browser and the browser had the user's privacy and security first and foremost above all else, even above the digital economy, online digital advertising economy. Obviously, that was super popular with a lot of people. He did an AMA a couple of months ago, and people asked, well, when they can get an email service or some type of media service like YouTube, alternatives, something that doesn't track users, something that doesn't monitor their information. And of course, as open as we are to doing some fun things like that, there's only so many hours in the day and there's only so many resources on a team. And so it's a lot easier. It's a lot less frictiony, I guess, to align ourselves with people who are ideologically, in cohorts with us. And so DuckDuckGo is a really awesome, search engine. They've had explosive growth measured by the sheer number of queries per day. And DuckDuckGo doesn't store information about users. They have worked up a model similar to our own where they can monetize their service without actually monitoring users across the web. And so we've partnered with DuckDuckGo here stateside. We recently announced a partnership with Quant over in Europe, I think in France and Germany primarily. Because Quant, again, is another emerging search engine that doesn't track users. I don't even think Quant stores cookies on your machine. They have it's really clever whenever you have privacy and security as your foundation and axiom. It's almost your presupposition to everything you do. It's really quite clever the ways in which you can find a means to monetize your business without tracking or monitoring users.
That's very cool. I think it's interesting that there is this that there are different companies that are working together. Like when they recognize, these folks over here are also trying to do something that we're trying to do. So the things just kind of line up naturally, and they don't end up being like a conflicts in any way. It's like, we can make all this stuff work. One of the things that I wanted to ask about specifically was mobile, more specifically mobile on iOS, but in general, what is the mobile story for Brave when compared to, we on this show, we talk a lot about web platform stuff. So we talk a lot about PWAs, we talk a lot about web components, other platform features. So I'm curious what the overall story is on mobile. And then are there any additional challenges with Brave on iOS?
Early on, I think there was iOS kind of famously locked you into the Safari engine, if I'm not mistaken. And so you had some limitations there. Android, of course, is just super exciting. You have quite a bit of liberty there. And so we leverage the same core components of the Chrome browser and stuff on Android. Android, we just recently announced, blew right past 10 million downloads. Which is pretty fantastic. But as far as the development experience, you should have kind of the same setup that you would have previously. You're still going to have the same core engines running your code. You're still going to have the same scripting engines, processing your JavaScript and stuff. The only issue that you would really run into again would be anything that's caused by an adder tracker list blocking aspect. So if you are requesting data from a domain that has been marked as untrusted or something like that, then of course some of your requests would fall through and you wouldn't get those responses. And so those are typically the areas that developers would actually encounter some type of friction. And those are the places where we're trying to alleviate that pain if they do run into it. But ideally, basically whatever experience you've had in the past should be replicable in a Brave browser on mobile as well.
So I know that you have an internal project that's you could see it on GitHub, but it's the Brave UI experimental stuff that you did, and that was early on with React. I'm curious if you're building anything related to that, or if you need anything like those sort of things now. If you're using like custom elements or anything that the actual platform could enable you.
We are definitely, so I think we mentioned as well too, whenever we forked Electron, actually whenever we were using Electron, we used React from the very beginning. And so we've continued to use React. Of course, we have something like a style guide where we actually have a library of core components and stuff that we can reuse throughout the application. And that's something that stuck with us from the early days of Brave and is still with us today as we have the Brave core builds based on Chromium, because we still have a lot of internal resources which need to have that consistency, that reuse of component and such. And so we are, I don't know that we're using custom elements or Shadow DOM or anything like that. I think we're using React much in the same way that many users use it as well. And so we do have the Brave UI library. It's open source, as you mentioned. It's kind of an internal project, but because Brave has no walls or windows, we basically just, if we're working on something, we put it up on GitHub. And so, users can benefit from that. They may in fact spot some issues. They could submit patches and that type of stuff, even though it's not really a general use library, but it's something that people are still super generous with whenever you publish your code like that. It is radically different for me. Whenever I went to Brave from Microsoft, Microsoft is undergoing radical changes. They have this fiery molten core, which is trying to crack through this hardness, calloused exterior. And the team that I worked on, I was on the Edge team, is a very open source friendly team, and they're looking for every opportunity to share their progress and what they're working on. And but you still had to be a little reserved with what you said, when you said it, how often you spoke, and how loudly. And coming to Brave, there was just none of that. It was like, what we're working on is completely open to the public, and we can talk about it. And if they have questions, we'll tell them. And if they have even, one of the big things was dates. When is this going to be ready? When are you guys going to have this shipping? Oh my goodness, that was a nightmare. We're working at, it's 2 weeks, 2 to 6 weeks, and they're 6 to 8 weeks, whatever it is. And but at Brave, you notice a very different tone and a very different story. It's like, we're already open source. People can see our commits. They can see effectively all the elements that would go into a burn down chart and such. And so we have no benefit in trying to evade these questions. We can just talk to people openly about it. And so it's been a fantastic, very liberated environment.
Yeah, that's great. It's always awesome to hear about open source stuff, especially when a company that with its technology based around open source things is successful. It's always interesting just to look. We obviously asked a lot of questions about how the business works, and then you don't have to build a thing, wall it off, and sell it for a license in order for your company to be successful. So we're starting to run out of time now. One thing that we do want to know is what is next. What's next for Brave? What cool features are you all working on? What are some things that the community is asking for that you're considering implementing? Pretty much anything else that we haven't asked. What should we know?
Well, the next big thing is Brave Core. That's us moving to the Chromium Foundation more directly. And that's we have builds online right now. So if you go to brave.com/download-beta, or hyphen beta. I never know which term to use there because it's interpreted differently by different people. I need to just come up with the ASCII number for it and then communicate that to people. But effectively, if you go there and download that right now, you can see what the browser is going to look like. It kind of it has dark and light themes, which is probably the one of the primary things people asked for in the past was they want a dark theme for their browser. Another big thing is Brave Rewards. So we talked briefly about Brave Payments in the past, and that was the means by which people could monetize or remonetize content on the web. But a lot of people, we got feedback saying, you know what, this is fantastic. It's great. I like the monthly ability to support people, but sometimes I just want to send people like 5 BAT because there was something in that moment, something that I really appreciated. And I just want to give it to them right now. And so we're starting to look at a means by which we can do that, because one of the core components of Brave Payments was the ability to contribute on the web in a way that didn't expose you or your private browsing to anybody. Because we didn't want to say, okay, well, here is Eric, and Eric went to these 7 domains, and Eric gave 80 BAT distributed in this proportion to these 70 domains. And so one of the things we do is we actually leverage the Anonymize 2 protocol to effectively mask who is giving what to whom. And we're able to do this in such a way that we don't actually leak any information about users. No privacy is lost. And so we're trying to set up the same thing with Brave Rewards, where you could do smaller donations as well immediately to people, but still in such a way that it doesn't expose you or information about you or your browsing online or anything like that. And so Brave Rewards would be something to check out. And then, of course, Brave Ads. That's that ability to monetize your own attention on the web. It's a completely opt-in component, but we have hundreds of volunteers right now testing it and training our machine learning models. And we're very excited for what that is going to achieve in the future in ways of monetizing content online and paying people who have never been paid before because they were too small or their content was too obscure or something like that.
Well, fantastic. That's great to hear. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Mr. Sampson, as it is. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you guys have been wonderful hosts. I love the podcast. It is a complete joy to get to participate today.
Come back. Talk to us more about all things Brave, all things browsers. We'd love to hear. We'd love to have you back. Gentlemen, anything to ask before we round out episode number 174?
I'd just like to
thank you for all your hard
again.
work.
Well, thank you all as well. It's been a pleasure. And if there are any other questions from viewers, feel free to ping me on Twitter at Brave Sampson, SAMPSON.
Fantastic. We'll make sure to get that in the show notes as well. Danny, Leon, Eric, closing thoughts?
I think this episode's been fascinating. It's been really good to kind of hear all of the amazing features going into Brave, and I'm definitely going to spend a bit more time with it for sure. And I just want to add, Danny, you're a liar. I've just seen on your webcam, glorious blue sky. You told us at the beginning of this show that you were like miserable. If I showed you outside my window now, you would weep for me.
No, that sun right there is a momentary lapse. It's going to go away in a few seconds, and I'll go back to being sad. No, it's going away right now. It's going. Anyway. It's gone. It's completely gone.
Thank you so much again, Samson. It's been a really good episode. Thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you guys have been generous hosts, so thank you so much as well.
And this has been episode number 174 of the Web Platform Podcast. Today we've talked to Sampson about Brave, all things browser, all things web platform. Tune in next week when we expand your horizons of all things that you can do to reach your end users and make the web awesome. Thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of your week.